that last Friday. I said, hey, I'm going to watch the debate. I have some leadership lessons that come from the debate. I did watch it yesterday, and what I've decided to do, because I decided to do this before I knew what it was going to actually be, but once I watched it, I decided that I'd share a few ideas about what I took from the debate and from the process around trust, since that's the rest of what I'm going to talk about. So I see some others are joining us. I'm glad that you're here. If you are here and you've not been to one of these before, if I see something that you, if I say something that you like, if you just tap on your screen like that, just like that, we will get some of those hand raising things. It makes me happy. It gives me a little feedback, and feedback, of course, is a good thing, positive or negative. Now, this doesn't give us a chance for you to tell me that I'm doing something wrong, but it does at least let me know if I'm doing something well. So I appreciate that. So the article that was on my blog today that I released in our newsletter this morning was called "What is My Set Point?" Here's the draft of it that I wrote from before it got published. And I thought we'd start there. So like I said, two things. We're going to talk about trust in general, and then a little bit about observations from the debate in relationship to that. A lot of people joining us. Really, really glad you're here. Maybe it's because it's about the debate thing. So maybe we got people joining us. If you're joining us, you've never seen me, don't know anything about me, tap the screen so I can see that, because that would be interesting to know if the title, if the headline, yeah, there it is, if it's the headline that's bringing you here. Yeah, no worries. I'm not going to be CNN or CNBC or Fox or FBN or anything. We're just going to talk about leadership and trust. So let's start with the article. And the thing that I want to really share with you is the idea that trust is something that we all want. I mean, isn't it? I mean, all of us would like to be more trusted by more people, and all of us would like to be have more people that we can trust. So on both sides of that equation, people that trust us and more people that we can trust, more of that is good. There's no bad things about that, right? So we would love more of that. So we're talking about something that we would like more of. So if we think about it that way, then trust is a noun. It's a thing. I want more trust. And trust is a noun. Look it up in the dictionary. Trust is something that exists. And yet, you have all said to someone, and I've certainly said to someone, that I trust you, or I trust them. So if I say that, that means that's something that I do, right? Trust is also a verb. It's something that we do. As I wrote in the article this morning, if trust was only a noun, then and I can say I trust you, then I could also say things like, well, I cow you, or I PC you, or I book you. Well, those are all nouns, and so those sentences make no sense. So trust is a noun, but it's also a verb. And it's in that combination that we get the first key idea that we need to take from this whole concept of trust. And that is, if it's both something that exists and it's something that we want, and it's also a verb, it's also something that we do, here's the key. And if you just take this from this and nothing else, I hope you will remember this, that the more of the verb you do, the more I trust others, the more they will trust me. And so the more of the verb that I do, the more of the noun that I will get. That is a fundamentally valuable thing to remember. It also says something else, doesn't it? It says that if I want more trust, then I need to do something in order to gain it. If I want more of it around me, if I want more of the noun, then I have to take some action. So that says that if I want more trust in my life, there are things in my relationships at work and any other place, then there's things I ought to be doing, because if I do those things, I can create more of that. That's exciting, right? That's exciting. If you agree with that, tap the screen, because that's good news, right? That's really good news. So let's step back from the whole trust piece of this. And I'll just step back from that a second. And I want to think about this. So I take actions, all of us take actions in our lives that are related to things that we think. In other words, another way to think about this is this, that we only take actions that make sense to us based on our view of the world. So the way we see the world creates the actions that we take. So we live or we act in consistency with that. That's huge. It's an important thing for us to remember. So what that says is that if we go backwards, that our thoughts create our actions. Well, what creates our thoughts? Well, the things that create our thoughts are the things that we notice, and the things that we notice are related to things that we believe. So our beliefs drive our thinking. Our beliefs drive our observations, and our thinking and our observations drive our actions, right? So as I put in the newsletter earlier today, and on my blog, I wrote, and this isn't the first time you've even heard this, but hopefully this is a connected idea for you, that belief drives thought, which drives action. Now let's go back to trust, because we said if we want to build more trust, we've got to if we take actions to build trust, we'll get more trust. So some of us live in a world that says, if I want more trust with that person, but they're going to have to show me. I'm from Missouri. I'm from the show me state. You've got to show me that you deserve it. So what you're saying in that moment is, I'm not going to act. I'm going to wait. And if I'm waiting, what are they likely doing? Waiting. And so what are we going to get? Not a lot of trust growth very rapidly, and certainly not trust growth that comes proactively. It may sort of grow organically, slowly, a little bit at a time. But let's go back to our 3-step thing: belief, thought, action. Here's the thing. All of that goes back to our beliefs. So what we believe has a huge impact on what we look for, what we notice, and therefore what we do. And it's the doing that creates this. But we ought to go back to the source, to the belief, and say, what do I believe about the other person? Or what do I fundamentally believe about people in this situation, or whatever? So what I'm saying then is, here's the big idea. The big idea is that we have a mental belief about people, or about people in a certain situation, that leads us through that belief to influence everything downstream from that. So if I believe that you have to prove that you're trustworthy, then I'm going to wait, and it's going to take us a lot longer for trust to build, because the more of the verb we do, the more of the noun we get. It's important. It's valuable. So if trust is something that we want more of, I'm suggesting we can influence it by taking actions. And I'm really suggesting that those actions are based, or at the beginning, foundationally, on our belief. I'm encouraging you to think about your beliefs. I'm encouraging you to think about your set point. So you can in your, and by the way, we all have, I believe, a trust set point in different situations. It's just a question of whether we're thinking about it, and we're not, because it's subconscious, right? So think about it this way. If I start with a low set point that says, I trust has to build, I've got to see it, I'm going to assume a low trust level and hope it will build over time. If that's my belief, then I'm going to take less action. And if that's my belief, the other person can tell it's going to take us a lot longer to build it. So the risk there is that the reward there is going to take us a long time to build trust, but it's also low risk. It's low risk because I won't get hurt, I won't be disappointed, I won't be frustrated, etc. So if we have the low set point, we've got low risk, low reward. If we set a high set point, in other words, I'm going to trust you implicitly, I'm going to trust you on the front end and believe that in most cases it's going to work out, then that's going to build trust faster, because the other person is going to tend to try to live up to that trust, and that's high, but that's higher risk. I could get frustrated, I could get disappointed, I could get hurt. In some work situations, I could get hurt physically. As it turns out, there's more pieces to trust than just whether you're honest with me. So we don't probably have time to dive into all that, but here again is the point. Wherever we set our set point has an impact on how much trust is in our life. So if you look at your working life, and you say, there's not as much trust around me as I wish there was, then I would say, look in the mirror and say, what's my belief? Where's my set point? Because that's going to have a huge impact on what actually happens when it's all said and done. Your set point has an impact on the output of amount of trust. So I'm going to strongly suggest that if you want more trust in your life, if you want more trust in the relationships around you, if you want more trust at work, that what you ought to start thinking about is your set point, which you already have unconsciously. What I'm trying to do right now is get you to think about it consciously. So I'll leave you with that challenge there. But I promised you two things on this video. One was a little bit about trust and the trust set point. The other one was, hey, what about this whole debate thing and how does that all relate? So again, I decided to do this and promoted it ahead of time. I didn't certainly know what was going to happen in the debate. I certainly didn't know it was going to go as long as it did. And so the first thing I'll say about the debate is I didn't see all of it because I snoozed a little, and I actually went to bed before it was over, although I think it was almost over. So I have to say that as a starting point. I didn't see it all, but you know what? In and of itself, that says something about someone who was interested to watch, someone who had a reason to watch, which was to prepare for this, and yet it didn't really capture my attention completely. So that's probably not a good sign, or maybe it just means I don't get enough sleep. I don't know. Maybe either of those things are true. But here's what I want to say about the debate and about the process in general about trust. Here the research says, and I won't get this exactly right, but pretty much in the last large number of elections, 50, 60, 70 years, that while as we get down to two candidates, or in some cases three candidates, there's been research done, surveys done to determine the likability of the candidates and the trustability of the candidates outside of the political stuff. And here's the reality. The reality is that the person consistently, the person that gets elected is the person that the most people think is trustworthy, that most people think are likable, that most people would like to have a cup of coffee or have a beer with, and they feel that they would be comfortable with, that they identify with outside of politics. So yesterday, we had a debate on the Republican side of the field. So there's probably some people who are on the other sort of ideological side weren't even watching to start with. So as I watched the debate, I was thinking about tonight, and I was thinking about trust, and I was thinking about that data that says, at the end of the day, what the candidates need to ultimately do is to get us to the place of trusting them, which is, of course, why a number of candidates in the past that have had scandals show up that their names are footnotes in history, because at this stage or even later in the process before a convention, they sort of went away because of things that allowed us or led us to not trust them anymore. And I won't give examples, but you can think of them. And that's why in the last few days, Ben Carson has spent so much time and energy trying to say, I'm trustworthy, that some of the stuff that's being said and written and drudged up and all that isn't whatever, and trying to mince the words and all that. And again, I'm not trying to say he's right, he's wrong. I'm not making any judgment about that. But the observation is that he's exactly right, that he needs to try to make that happen. He needs to try to get us in the electorate to say, that's not real, that's not valid, or that's not important. Although the important part is true, it is important. So I thought he handled the question last night very well when they sort of brought that up. And he sort of talked about it in conjunction, in context to something else, a little bit in the political frame. And then he came back and says, the people that know me know I'm honest. And so he used a very direct way at the end of that to try to connect with us, to connect through the camera to us. I thought that was very effective. But I think that there were several things, and I'm going to actually need my glasses now, vanity out the window so I can actually help you. So I would encourage you to think as you watch this process moving forward, think back on the debate last night if you DVR'd it, or even when you watch the news tonight as they're analyzing it. Just watch for yourself, not for their analysis, but for what you see as it relates to, from your perspective, which of the candidates are showing traits, are showing behaviors, are doing things, verbs, they're doing things that would elicit or build trust. Now, certainly it relates to our belief. So right now, politicians in general have a big problem. They have a big problem is that we collectively don't have a lot of trust in them as a whole, right? Congress, the ratings of Congress and trust, super low. The ratings of politicians in general, super low. So they're trying to dig up from that, trying to work up from that. So I think if you have a low belief in them in general, it's going to be harder for you to see it differently. But I just encourage you to use this process as a way to watch in the third party way, a little bit more about what do you observe about trust in terms of what they're trying to build, even though it's one to many. I think there's some things that we can consider. There was one time last night when I thought Donald Trump said something that I thought was a trust building statement. Now, there were some other things I don't think were, but he said one thing at one point. He says, listen, we have 8 of us, or however many there were, all of us have a tax plan. And while we all don't agree with each other on them entirely, we all agree that all of them are better than what the alternative is. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to agree with him, but as a strategy, as an approach of trying in that moment anyway to bring people together, that was a trust building type of statement. It was also a statement that was meant to sort of be unifying, which is what we're all in many ways looking for. Even if we want to unify around a certain belief point, there's the need and the desire for unification. So I think that was a useful thing. 2 other things that you see candidates doing that we can apply in our work all the time. One is candidates using stories of people that they've met on the campaign trail to help them make their points. Now, sometimes that comes across a little overtly, like I want to get this story in. And so it's a little bit artificial from that perspective, but still, Carly Fiorina last night used a story, got asked a question, started, at least at the beginning, diverted away from the question by telling the story, tied it back in to actually answer the question, which was refreshing because they don't always do that, which is interesting. I'll say a bit about that in a second. But the idea of using a story to build connection, of using a story to show commonality, to show understanding, is very valuable. Now, the thing that a lot of us complain about in a debate situation is that they don't ever answer the question directly. And I actually believe that if a candidate sort of really came out at that, rather than trying to frame it around to their talking points, they would score a lot of points with a lot of people, simply because it would be a trust building thing. I think that's worth thinking about. But let's go back to stories. So stories of others that show connection, stories of others that show understanding and empathy. We aren't on that stage in Milwaukee last night, and yet we can use that strategy as a way to communicate more effectively and build trust. And of course, the other type of story that really all candidates will use, some of them more effectively than others, is to tell personal stories, life stories, origin stories about their growing up, about their kidhood, about certain sorts of things. And if your mental frame matches with that, and if you feel a connection to that story, then the likability and trust with that person goes up significantly. The same thing is true for us in our work, with our teams, with our neighbors. If we want to build trust, there are actions that we can take. So that sort of puts us all the way back to where we started. So what I started with was say, let's talk about what trust means and how do we build it. We build it by the more of the verb we do, the more of the noun we get. And then I promised to talk a bit about the debate, and hopefully I shared some things there that were useful. Really what I want you to take from that is that if you've been thinking about what I've said, then I'd strongly encourage you to keep watching the political process, the presidential process, through the framework of trust. Because what you're going to find is there's a lot there that we can learn, not just about who might I choose to vote for, and not just about sort of the political pundit process, although you might find that interesting. I'm saying that that there's a lot we can learn about communication and trust, even though their context is different, even though their situation is different. I strongly encourage you to think about that, debate or otherwise. There'll be more debates, more opportunities. There'll be lots of chances to watch all of this and use this as a way to say, what are they doing that's trust building that I could apply? What are they doing that isn't building trust that I want to make sure I avoid? If we do those things, we will become more effective leaders. And that's sort of why I did all of this to start with. So we've had a lot of folks here. I've been really pleased to share some of these thoughts with you. Let me just say this. I started by saying that trust is something we all want more of. We all want to be trusted by more people, and we all want to feel like we can trust more other people more. Like it's something we all want more of. And what I've given you tonight is a framework to help you think about what you can do to have more of that in your life. And then in terms of the debate, giving you some things to observe and ways to observe to help you figure out what works and what doesn't. Hope you found this useful. I certainly enjoyed sharing with you. If you did, I'd appreciate a little tap on the screen before you go. It just makes me feel good. But regardless, I am so pleased to have shared with you, and I'm so honored that you did spend some time with me. If you found it useful, I hope you'll follow me here on Blab. I hope you'll follow us on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And you can always go learn more at blog.kevineikenberry.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to talking to all of you again soon. Have a great evening. Thanks.